the blood dripping from her split lip, did nothing to diminish the fierce determination blazing in her eyes as she stood between the cowering child and three grown men who should have known better. Isaiah Patterson had come down from his mountain cabin outside Empire City, Colorado, in the spring of 1878 for supplies, not expecting to witness the kind of courage that would shake him to his very core. He stood nearly 6 feet 5 inches tall, with shoulders broad enough to carry a full-grown elk across them, which he had done more than once during his years in the Rockies. His dark hair fell past his collar, and his arms were thick with muscle earned from years of chopping wood, hauling water, and surviving in the harsh mountain wilderness. But despite his imposing size and strength, he found himself frozen for just a moment, watching the young woman face down 3 bullies outside the general store. The smallest of the 3 men, though still considerably larger than the woman, had his hand raised as if to strike her again. "Move aside, girl. This does not concern you." "It concerns me when 3 cowards decide to torment a child," she shot back, her voice steady despite the blood trailing down her chin. Behind her, a boy of perhaps 9 or 10 clutched at her skirts, his face tear-stained and terrified. "Jacob did nothing wrong. You dropped your money yourself, and blaming a child for your own clumsiness is the mark of a pathetic excuse for a man." That was when Isaiah moved. His long strides ate up the dusty street between them in seconds, and before the man could follow through on his threat, Isaiah's massive hand closed around his wrist like an iron shackle. "The lady said no," Isaiah rumbled, his voice deep and quiet but carrying an unmistakable edge of danger. The 3 men spun around, and Isaiah saw fear flash across their faces as they took in his size. Good. They should be afraid. Men who picked on women and children deserved worse than fear. But Isaiah had learned long ago that his mere presence was often enough to end conflicts before they truly began. "This is none of your business, stranger," the ringleader sputtered, trying and failing to pull his wrist free from Isaiah's grip. "I am making it my business." Isaiah released the man's wrist with enough force to send him stumbling backward. "Now I suggest the 3 of you find somewhere else to be before I forget my manners entirely." They didn't need to be told twice. The trio scrambled away down the street, throwing angry glances over their shoulders but clearly unwilling to test whether Isaiah's threat was genuine. Only then did Isaiah turn his full attention to the woman, and what he saw made his breath catch in his throat. She was perhaps in her early 20s, with auburn hair that had come loose from its pins during the confrontation, framing a face that would have been beautiful even without the fierce spirit that animated it. Her dress, though simple and well worn, was clean and carefully mended. But it was her eyes that held him captive, a striking green that reminded him of the aspen groves in summer, still blazing with that same determination he had witnessed moments before. "Thank you," she said, her voice softer now but still strong. She touched her lip gingerly, wincing slightly. "Though I had the situation well in hand." Despite everything, Isaiah felt a smile tug at his mouth. "I don't doubt it, madam, but sometimes even the bravest fighters appreciate backup." She studied him for a long moment, and Isaiah found himself wanting to stand straighter, to somehow be worthy of that examining gaze. Then she smiled, a real smile that transformed her entire face, and Isaiah felt something shift in his chest, something fundamental and terrifying and wonderful all at once. "Florence Turner," she said, extending her hand like a man would. "And this brave young man is Jacob Miller." Isaiah took her hand, marveling at how small it felt in his own, yet remembering the courage he had just witnessed. "Isaiah Patterson. I have a cabin up in the mountains, but I come down for supplies now and again. Florence's handshake was firm and confident. The mountain man. I have heard people speak of you in town, though I only arrived in Empire City 3 months ago myself. The boy, Jacob, peeked out from behind Florence, his eyes wide as he took in Isaiah's impressive size. You are really big, mister. Jacob, Florence chided gently, but Isaiah laughed, a sound that felt rusty from disuse. He didn't laugh often up in his solitary cabin. That I am, son, comes in handy for carrying supplies and dealing with bears. Bears? Jacob's fear seemed forgotten in his sudden fascination. Have you really seen bears? More than I can count. Maybe sometime I'll tell you about the grizzly that tried to steal my winter stores. Florence's expression softened as she watched Isaiah interact with the boy, and Isaiah felt that strange sensation in his chest intensify. He had been alone on his mountain for nearly 5 years, ever since he had fled the crowded cities of the East and the memories of a war he wanted to forget. He had convinced himself he preferred solitude, that he was better off with only the trees and animals for company. But looking at Florence Turner now, seeing the dried blood on her lip from where she had defended this child without a moment's hesitation, he wondered if he had been lying to himself all along. Let me at least buy you both a drink at the saloon, Isaiah offered. It's the least I can do for the entertainment of watching you face down 3 grown men without blinking. Florence hesitated, and Isaiah saw a flicker of something, perhaps uncertainty or fear, cross her face. I don't typically frequent saloons, Mr. Patterson. Isaiah, please. And I meant the hotel restaurant, not the saloon proper. They serve decent tea and have cold milk for young Jacob here. The boy tugged on Florence's skirt. Please, Miss Turner, I'm awful thirsty after all that. Florence's face softened again, and she ruffled the boy's hair with obvious affection. Very well, but only because Jacob has earned a treat for his bravery. As they walked toward the Empire Hotel, Isaiah found himself hyper-aware of Florence's presence beside him. She barely came up to his shoulder, and he found himself wanting to position his body between her and any potential threat, to ensure no one else had the chance to hurt her. The protective instinct surprised him with its intensity. He barely knew this woman. How did you come to be in Empire City? Isaiah asked as they settled into a corner table in the hotel restaurant. The proprietor, a kindly widow named Mrs. Henderson, brought tea for Florence, milk for Jacob, and coffee for Isaiah without being asked. Florence wrapped her hands around her teacup, and Isaiah noticed the fine tremor in her fingers, the only sign that the confrontation had affected her at all. I came from Boston. My father passed away last year, and there was nothing left for me there. I had heard that the West offered opportunities for those willing to work hard, so I used what little money I had for a train ticket and headed toward a new life. That must have taken considerable courage, Isaiah said quietly. Leaving everything you knew behind. No more courage than living alone on a mountain, Florence countered, her eyes meeting his with a directness that made his heart skip. I imagine we both have our reasons for choosing paths less traveled. She was perceptive, he would give her that. Isaiah took a long drink of his coffee, considering how much to share. He wasn't accustomed to talking about himself, had spent years actively avoiding such conversations. But something about Florence made him want to open up, to share the parts of himself he had kept locked away. I was a soldier, he said finally. During the war between the states, when it ended, I couldn't seem to fit back into regular society. The noise, the crowds, the constant demands for pleasantness, when there was nothing pleasant left inside me. So I came west and kept going until I found a spot where the only sounds were wind and water, and the occasional elk. Florence's expression held understanding rather than pity, and Isaiah was grateful for that. Sometimes solitude is the only medicine for wounds that go too deep for words. You speak from experience. Different wounds, perhaps, but wounds nonetheless. Florence glanced at Jacob, who was contentedly drinking his milk and eating the cookies Mrs. Henderson had brought. My father fell into drink after my mother died. The man I thought I would marry decided a woman with a drunk for a father, and no dowry wasn't worth his time. I learned that the only person I could truly depend on was myself. Isaiah felt a surge of anger toward the faceless man who had abandoned her. Then he was a fool. Florence looked up, surprise and something warmer flickering across her features. You don't know me, Isaiah Patterson. Perhaps I am not worth the trouble. I know you stepped between a child and 3 men twice your size without hesitation. I know you took a blow to defend someone weaker than yourself. That tells me everything I need to know about your character. Isaiah held her gaze, willing her to see his sincerity. A person's worth isn't measured in dowries or social standing. It's measured in moments like the one I witnessed today. A flush crept up Florence's cheeks and she looked down at her tea. You are very kind to say so. I'm not kind, I'm honest. There's a difference. Isaiah paused, then made a decision that surprised even himself. What do you do for work in Empire City? I take in laundry and do mending. It's honest work, though the pay is modest. I also help Mrs. Henderson here at the hotel when she needs extra hands. Florence straightened her shoulders, her pride evident. I make enough to rent a small room above the seamstress shop and feed myself. That's more than I had in Boston. Jacob piped up, his milk mustache making him look even younger than his years. Miss Turner is the best seamstress in town. She fixed my Sunday shirt when I tore it, and my ma said you couldn't even see where the rip was. High praise indeed, Isaiah said with a smile, but his mind was already working through an idea. I don't suppose you would be willing to do some mending for me. I'm afraid my skills with a needle leave much to be desired, and my shirts bear the evidence of that. It was a transparent excuse to see her again, and from the knowing look in Florence's eyes, she recognized it as such. But she smiled anyway, that transformative smile that made Isaiah's chest tighten. I suppose I could make an exception for the man who came to my rescue, even if I didn't strictly need rescuing. I'll bring them by tomorrow if that suits you. Tomorrow would be fine. The seamstress shop is on Main Street, and my room is accessed by the stairs on the side. You can knock on the blue door at the top. They talked for another hour, and Isaiah found himself more engaged in conversation than he had been in years. Florence was intelligent and quick-witted, with a dry sense of humor that caught him off guard and made him laugh more than he had since before the war. She asked him about life in the mountains, and he found himself describing the beauty of sunset over the peaks, the absolute silence of a snow-covered forest, the satisfaction of building something with his own 2 hands. In turn, she told him about growing up in Boston, about her love of books and learning, about her mother's garden that had been the one spot of beauty in their modest home. She spoke of the journey west with equal parts excitement and terror, of the vast emptiness of the prairie that had both frightened and liberated her. Jacob eventually fell asleep with his head on the table, exhausted from the day's excitement. Florence looked at him with such tender affection that Isaiah felt his heart clench. "He is not yours?" Isaiah asked quietly. "No, though I wish he were. His mother is a widow who works as a cook at one of the boarding houses. She works long hours to support Jacob and his little sister. I help watch them when I can." Florence brushed the hair back from Jacob's forehead. "Children deserve protection and kindness. The fact that those men would target him for something that wasn't even his fault makes my blood boil." Isaiah watched her gentle touch, the fierce protectiveness in her eyes, and felt something slot into place in his heart. This woman, this brave, fierce, tender woman, was going to change his life. He could feel it as surely as he could feel the calluses on his palms from years of hard work. "I should get him home to his mother," Florence said reluctantly. "She will be worried. Let me walk with you. It's getting dark, and those three men might still be nursing their wounded pride." Florence looked like she might argue, then nodded. "I would appreciate that, thank you." Isaiah lifted Jacob as easily as if the boy weighed nothing, cradling him against his broad chest. The boy stirred but didn't wake, instinctively trusting even in sleep. They walked through the deepening twilight of Empire City, the gas lamps beginning to flicker to life along the main street. The boarding house where Jacob's mother worked was on the edge of town, a weathered but well-kept building. A woman in her 30s rushed out when she saw them approaching, relief and worry warring on her face. "Jacob, Florence, what happened?" Florence quickly explained the situation while Isaiah transferred the sleeping boy to his mother's arms. The woman, Mrs. Miller, looked at Isaiah with tears in her eyes. "Thank you, sir. Thank you both. Jacob is all I have left of his father, and if something had happened to him—" "Nothing happened, Sarah," Florence said firmly, taking the woman's hand. "He's safe, and he was very brave." After assuring Mrs. Miller several more times that Jacob was fine, Isaiah and Florence walked back toward the main street. The evening had grown cool, as it always did in the mountains, and Isaiah noticed Florence shiver slightly in her thin shawl. "Here," he said, shrugging out of his heavy coat. "Take this." "I couldn't possibly. You can and you will. I run hot anyway, all that time in the cold." He settled the coat around her shoulders before she could protest further. It engulfed her, the hem nearly reaching her knees, and Isaiah had to suppress a smile at the sight. Florence pulled the coat closer, and Isaiah pretended not to notice the way she briefly pressed her face against the collar, as if breathing in his scent. "Thank you for everything today. You didn't have to help, but you did. I couldn't stand by and watch a woman get hurt defending a child." "What kind of man would that make me?" Isaiah walked slowly, not wanting the evening to end. "Besides, I'm glad I was there. Otherwise I might never have met you." "And would that have been such a loss?" Florence asked, but there was a teasing lilt to her voice. "The greatest loss imaginable," Isaiah said seriously. "I didn't realize how much I had been merely existing until I saw you standing there, fierce and bloody and absolutely magnificent." Florence stopped walking, turning to face him fully. The street lamp cast golden light across her face, highlighting the bruise that was forming on her cheek and the split in her lip. She should have looked battered and tired. Instead, she looked beautiful and strong and entirely too far away. "You shouldn't say such things to a woman you just met," she whispered. "Why not, if they're true?" "Because they make me want to believe them." Isaiah stepped closer, close enough that he could see the flecks of gold in her green eyes, close enough to smell the lavender soap she used. "Then believe them, Florence. I have spent 5 years hiding from the world, convincing myself I was better off alone. But 5 minutes watching you defend that boy with everything you had, and I realized I had been lying to myself. Some people are worth coming down from the mountain for." Florence's breath caught, and for a moment Isaiah thought she might close the distance between them. But then she stepped back, pulling his coat tighter around herself like armor. "I should go. It's late, and I have work in the morning." Isaiah felt the rejection like a physical blow but forced himself to nod. He had pushed too hard, too fast. Of course she was wary. She barely knew him, and she had already been abandoned by one man who made promises. "Of course. I'll see you tomorrow, for the mending." "Tomorrow," Florence agreed. She started to remove his coat, but he stopped her. "Keep it for tonight. You can return it tomorrow with my shirts." Florence clutched the coat, looking up at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "Good night, Isaiah Patterson. Good night, Florence Turner." He watched until she disappeared into the seamstress shop, then made his way to the livery where he had stabled his horse. But instead of riding back up to his cabin as he had planned, Isaiah found himself renting a room at the hotel. He told himself it was because it was too dark to make the journey safely. He didn't examine too closely the fact that he simply didn't want to leave, not when Florence was still in town, not when he would see her again tomorrow. That night, lying in an unfamiliar bed, Isaiah stared at the ceiling and replayed every moment of the day. The shock of seeing Florence in danger, the way her eyes had blazed with determination, the softness in her voice when she spoke to Jacob, the feel of her small hand in his. The way she had looked at him like he was someone worth knowing, not just a scarred soldier hiding from the world. He had forgotten what it felt like to want something beyond simple survival. But now, having met Florence Turner, he wanted everything. He wanted to know every story she had to tell, every dream she harbored, every fear she fought against. He wanted to make her laugh, to see that transformative smile directed at him. He wanted to keep her safe while honoring the fierce independence that made her who she was. Most of all, he wanted to be worthy of her. And that, Isaiah knew, would require him to finally stop hiding and rejoin the world he had fled. Morning came with bright Colorado sunshine streaming through the hotel window. Isaiah washed, dressed in his least worn shirt, and tried to tame his long hair with limited success. He packed up the shirts he actually did need mending, along with a few others that were fine but served his purpose. The general store was his first stop. He selected the softest fabric he could find, a deep green that matched Florence's eyes, along with thread and buttons and other notions he suspected a seamstress might need. The proprietor, a sharp-eyed man named Mr. Thornton, watched the unusual purchases with barely concealed curiosity. "Getting into sewing, Patterson?" "Something like that," Isaiah said non-committally, paying for his purchases. He also bought fresh bread, cheese, apples, and a small jar of honey. It wasn't much, but he had noticed how thin Florence was, how her dress had been let out and taken in multiple times to extend its life. Pride wouldn't let her accept charity, but a small gift between friends, that might be acceptable. The blue door at the top of the stairs beside the seamstress shop looked exactly as Florence had described. Isaiah climbed the steps, his heart beating harder than it had during his confrontation with the three bullies. This felt more dangerous somehow, more important. He knocked firmly, then waited. Florence opened the door, and Isaiah felt his breath catch all over again. She was wearing a simple gray dress with a white collar, and her hair was neatly pinned up. The bruise on her cheek had darkened overnight, and her lip was still slightly swollen, but her eyes were bright and welcoming. "Isaiah, you're punctual. Mountain living teaches you to make the most of daylight hours," he said, holding up his bundle. "I brought the shirts. And well, a few other things." Florence stepped back to let him enter. Her room was tiny but immaculately clean and organized. A narrow bed stood against one wall, covered with a carefully mended quilt. A small table served as both eating space and work area, covered with neatly arranged sewing supplies. A single chair, a washstand, and a trunk comprised the rest of her furniture. But the window overlooked the street and let in good light, and she had added small touches that made it a home rather than just a room. A jar of wildflowers on the table, a few books stacked carefully on the windowsill, a drawing pinned to the wall that appeared to be a child's rendering of Florence with Jacob and a little girl. "It's not much," Florence said, suddenly seeming self-conscious. "It's perfect," Isaiah said honestly. "You have made it your own. That takes skill and creativity. Florence's expression softened. You have a gift for saying exactly the right thing, only when I mean it. Isaiah set his bundles on the table. The shirts genuinely need mending. These other things, I hoped you might accept them as a gift. The fabric and supplies are for your work. The food is for your table. Please don't refuse. It would make me happy to know you have them. Florence looked at the packages, then at Isaiah, her eyes suspiciously bright. You don't need to do this. I know I don't need to, I want to. Isaiah kept his voice gentle. Florence, I have more money than I need from my trapping and the furniture I make. I have no one to spend it on and no desire for anything beyond what I already have. Except now I find I have a very great desire to ensure that you have what you need. Please, let me do this small thing. Florence touched the fabric with careful fingers, and Isaiah saw her swallow hard. It's beautiful. I could make a new dress from this. I hoped you might. Green will suit you. You are a dangerous man, Isaiah Patterson, Florence whispered. You make it very difficult to maintain my independence when you offer such thoughtful gifts. I don't want to compromise your independence. I admire it too much for that. But independence and accepting kindness from someone who cares about you aren't mutually exclusive. Isaiah took a breath, deciding to risk honesty. I care about you, Florence. I know it's fast and probably foolish, but I can't seem to help it. You have done something to me, changed something fundamental, and I find I don't want to go back to the way things were before I met you. Florence looked up at him, and in her eyes, Isaiah saw the same yearning he felt, warring with fear and caution. I am afraid, she admitted. I thought I loved someone once and he discarded me without a second thought. How do I know you won't do the same? Isaiah wanted to reach for her but kept his hands at his sides, letting her maintain control of the space between them. You don't know. You can't know, not with absolute certainty. But I can tell you that I have never felt about anyone the way I feel about you. I can tell you that when I saw you defending Jacob yesterday, I saw true courage and compassion, the things I value most in this world. I can promise that if you give me a chance, I will spend every day trying to be worthy of the gift of your trust. What are you asking for, Isaiah? Time. Let me court you properly. Let me come down from my mountain and spend time with you. Let me prove through actions, not just words, that I am a man who keeps his promises. Florence was quiet for a long moment, her fingers still resting on the green fabric. Then she smiled, cautious but genuine. I would like that, but I have conditions. Name them. We take things slowly. I won't be rushed into anything, no matter how right it might feel in the moment. Agreed. You have to let me contribute equally to this relationship. I won't be a kept woman or a charity case. If we share meals, I cook as often as you provide the ingredients. If you give gifts, you must also accept them. That seems fair, though I warn you I'm not accustomed to receiving gifts. Then you'll have to get accustomed, because I'm not accustomed to accepting them either, and you have already broken that rule. Florence's smile widened slightly. And third, you have to tell me the truth about who you are and what you want. No hiding behind polite deflections or half-truths. If this is to work, we must be honest with each other. Isaiah extended his hand. You have a deal, Florence Turner. She shook his hand, her grip firm, and then surprised him by not immediately letting go. Now, let me look at these shirts that supposedly need mending, though I suspect half of them are fine. Only half. I thought I had been more subtle than that. Florence laughed, the sound bright and genuine, and Isaiah felt warmth spread through his chest. This, he thought. This is what I have been missing. Over the next several weeks, Isaiah found himself spending more time in Empire City than he had in years. He would come down from the mountain every few days, always with an excuse. More shirts that needed mending, A broken buckle Florence might know how to fix. A book he thought she might enjoy, fresh meat from his traps to share. Florence saw through every transparent excuse but welcomed him anyway. And slowly, carefully, they built something real between them. Isaiah learned that Florence read voraciously, devouring every book she could borrow or buy. He started bringing her volumes from his own carefully curated collection, and they would spend hours discussing stories and ideas. He discovered she had a wicked sense of humor that emerged once she felt comfortable, and that she could make him laugh with her sharp observations about the townspeople and their foibles. Florence learned that beneath Isaiah's quiet exterior and imposing size lay a gentle soul that had been battered by war and loss. He told her, in halting sentences that grew more fluid as trust built between them, about the battles he had fought, the friends he had lost, the things he had done and seen that haunted his sleep. She listened without judgment, holding his hand when the memories grew too dark, reminding him through her presence that he had survived, and that survival was its own form of courage. They took walks through Empire City and the surrounding foothills, Isaiah pointing out plants and animal tracks, Florence sharing stories from her childhood that made both of them laugh or shake their heads at the foolishness of youth. He taught her to identify edible plants and how to move quietly through the forest. She taught him to find beauty in small things he had overlooked. The pattern of frost on a window, the way evening light transformed ordinary buildings into something magical. Isaiah also got to know Jacob and his little sister Emma, and he found unexpected joy in the children's company. He carved animals for them from scraps of wood, taught Jacob to whittle, and helped Emma with her letters. Florence would watch these interactions with an expression so tender, it made Isaiah's heart ache with longing for a future where this might be their life, not stolen moments but everyday reality. The town began to talk, of course. People noticed the mountain man who suddenly couldn't seem to stay away from Empire City. They noticed how he looked at Florence Turner, like she hung the moon and stars. They noticed how Florence smiled more now, how some of the wary hardness had left her eyes. Mrs. Henderson at the hotel winked at Isaiah every time he came in for coffee. Mr. Thornton at the general store started setting aside special items he thought Florence might like, knowing Isaiah would buy them. Some of the talk was kind, some was less so. There were those who thought Florence was reaching above her station, trying to snare a man with property and means when she had nothing to offer but a pretty face and a sharp tongue. There were those who thought Isaiah was foolish for pursuing a woman with no family and no dowry, who came from poverty and scandal. Isaiah heard the whispers and didn't care. Florence heard them and did care, though she tried to hide it. He could see the way certain comments landed, the way she would suddenly pull back when things felt too good, too easy, as if waiting for the inevitable moment when he would realize his mistake and leave. It came to a head 6 weeks after they met. Isaiah had come to town and found Florence's room empty, the door locked. Mrs. Henderson informed him with obvious disapproval that Florence had taken a job cleaning out at the Prescott Ranch, a full day's work that would keep her from town until evening. Isaiah knew the Prescott Ranch. It was a hard place run by a hard man, and the work would be backbreaking. He also knew Florence's pride and that she would never forgive him if he interfered with her employment. So he waited, spending the day chopping wood for Mrs. Henderson and making repairs around her hotel, until finally, as the sun was setting, he saw Florence walking slowly up the main street. She looked exhausted, her dress dirty from hard work, her face pale with fatigue. But it was the defeated slump of her shoulders that gutted him, the way she seemed to have folded in on herself. Isaiah intercepted her before she reached her stairs. "Florence." She looked up, and he saw tears threatening in her eyes. "Not now, Isaiah, please. I'm too tired to be good company." "You don't have to be good company. You don't have to be anything but yourself." He gently touched her arm. "What happened?" "Nothing happened. I just worked very hard for very little pay because that's what people like me do. We work and we struggle and we make do, and men like you are kind to us for a little while until you remember that we're not suitable," and her voice broke, and she pressed her hand to her mouth. Isaiah's jaw tightened. "Who said you weren't suitable, Mrs. Prescott?" She was very kind about it, really. "She just thought I should know that pursuing a man of property when I had nothing was going to end badly for me. That you were probably enjoying my company now, but when it came time for something permanent, you would choose someone appropriate. Someone with family and connections and prospects. And you believed her." Isaiah kept his voice gentle, though anger burned through him at the cruelty of planting such seeds of doubt. "Shouldn't I? She's right, isn't she? What do I have to offer you? I live in a room barely bigger than a closet. I take in laundry and mending to survive. I have no family, no prospects, nothing but myself, and history has shown that myself isn't enough." Isaiah took Florence's hands in his, holding them carefully. "Look at me, please." Slowly, reluctantly, Florence raised her eyes to his. "You are enough," Isaiah said fiercely. "You are more than enough. You are everything. Do you understand? Your courage, your kindness, your strength, your humor, your mind, your heart, these are the things that matter. These are the things that make you precious beyond measure. I don't care about family connections or prospects. I care about you. But what kind of life could we have? Your cabin is built for one person. I have nothing to contribute to a household. People are already talking. Let them talk. Florence, I have been alone for 5 years because I thought I was better off that way. Then I saw you standing up to 3 bullies to protect a child, and I realized I had been slowly dying in my isolation. You brought me back to life. You make me want to be part of the world again. You make me want to build something bigger than just survival. That's what you contribute: hope and joy and a future worth having." "Isaiah," Florence whispered, and now the tears were falling freely. "I want to believe you. Then believe me. Trust me. Trust us." Isaiah pulled her closer, wrapping his arms around her, and after a moment's hesitation, Florence melted against him, her face pressed to his chest. He could feel her crying, all the exhaustion and fear and hope pouring out, and he just held her, one hand stroking her back while he murmured reassurances. They stood that way for a long time, locked together in the dying light, while the town went about its business around them. Isaiah didn't care who saw or what they thought. This woman in his arms was worth everything, and he would make sure she never doubted that again. Finally, Florence pulled back, wiping at her eyes. "I'm sorry. I got your shirt all wet." "I don't care about the shirt. I care about you." Isaiah cupped her face gently, careful of the bruise that had finally faded. "Come up to the cabin with me. Spend a day away from this town and all its whispers. Let me show you what our life could be like." "Isaiah, I can't just one day. I'll bring you back before dark, perfectly respectable. Mrs. Henderson can chaperone if that would make you more comfortable. But please, Florence, let me show you that what we have is real and possible and worth fighting for." Florence studied his face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "One day, but I need to change first and let Mrs. Henderson know where I'll be." "Of course, I'll wait here." 20 minutes later, Florence emerged in a cleaner dress with a small bag of necessities. Mrs. Henderson had, with obvious delight, agreed to accompany them as chaperone, thrilled to be part of what she was already calling the mountain man's courtship. The ride up to Isaiah's cabin took 2 hours, following trails that wound through pine forests and across rushing streams. Mrs. Henderson rode behind Isaiah on his large draft horse, while Florence sat in front of him on the saddle, tucked securely against his chest. Isaiah tried to ignore how perfectly she fit there, how right it felt to have her in his arms. The cabin appeared as they crested a final ridge, and Isaiah heard Florence's sharp intake of breath. He tried to see it through her eyes. The solid log structure he had built with his own hands, smoke curling from the stone chimney, surrounded by towering pines with mountain peaks rising majestically in the background. A small barn housed his horse and supplies, and a clear stream ran nearby, its voice a constant musical presence. "Isaiah," Florence breathed. "It's beautiful. It's home," he said simply. "Or it has been. But lately it has felt empty, like it was waiting for something, someone." He helped both women down from the horse, then showed them inside. The cabin was simple but well crafted, with sturdy furniture Isaiah had made himself. A large stone fireplace dominated one wall, already laid with wood for a fire. The kitchen area was organized and clean, with shelves holding supplies and dishes. A ladder led to a loft sleeping area, and several large windows let in light and spectacular views. But what caught Florence's attention was the books. Shelves lined two walls, filled with volumes on every subject imaginable. She drifted toward them like a moth to flame, running her fingers over the spines. "You said you liked to read, but I didn't realize." Her voice was filled with wonder. "Isaiah, there must be hundreds of books here." 537, last count. "They have been my companions for a long time, but I would trade all of them for good conversation with you." Florence turned to look at him, and something in her expression made Isaiah's heart pound. "You continually surprise me." "I hope that's a good thing." "It's a very good thing." Mrs. Henderson, with the tact of someone who understood the importance of the moment, announced she would take a walk to stretch her legs after the ride, despite Isaiah's protests that she was supposed to be chaperoning. "I'll stay close enough to maintain propriety, but far enough to let you two actually talk," she said firmly. "Some conversations need privacy, young man." Once she had gone, Florence continued her exploration of the cabin, touching things gently, examining the craftsmanship of the furniture, pausing to look out the windows at the stunning views. Isaiah started a fire and put coffee on to boil, trying to give her space while watching her from the corner of his eye. "How long did it take you to build all this?" Florence asked, running her hand along the smooth surface of the table. "The cabin took most of a summer. The furniture I have added over the years, piece by piece. It gave me something to do during the long winters." Isaiah poured coffee for both of them. "I built it for one, but it could easily be expanded. The barn, too. There's good land here, enough to run some cattle or horses if someone had a mind to. The stream is full of trout, and the hunting is excellent. It's isolated, but Empire City is only a few hours' ride when supplies are needed." Florence accepted the coffee, wrapping her hands around the mug. "You're trying to convince me it would be a good place to live. I'm trying to show you that what I'm offering isn't a hardship or a sacrifice. It's a real life, Florence. Maybe not an easy one, but a good one. An honest one. One we would build together. We have known each other for 6 weeks. I know. By conventional standards, that's not enough time, but I have learned that life can be short and unpredictable. When you find something real, something precious, you don't let conventions rob you of it." Isaiah set down his coffee and moved closer to her. "I'm not saying we rush into anything. I'm just asking you to see this as a possibility, a future we might build if we both want it." Florence looked around the cabin again, and Isaiah could almost see her imagining it. Curtains on the windows, her books mingling with his, 2 chairs by the fire instead of one, a life shared instead of two lives lived in parallel solitude. "I'm afraid," she said quietly. "I'm afraid to want this too much." "So am I," Isaiah admitted. "I'm terrified, actually. I have spent years protecting myself from feeling anything too deeply, but you broke through all those walls in a single moment, and now I can't imagine going back to the way I was before." Florence set down her coffee and turned to face him fully. "If we did this, if we truly tried to build something together, I would need certain things. Tell me. I would need to still be myself. I won't become someone else just to fit into the life of a mountain man's wife. I would need books and conversation and the freedom to have my own thoughts and opinions. I wouldn't want you to be anyone but yourself. That's who I fell in love with." Florence's eyes widened. "You love me." Isaiah hadn't meant to say it, not yet, but he couldn't take it back now. And truthfully, he didn't want to. "Yes, I love you. I love your courage and your fierce heart. I love the way you defend those who can't defend themselves. I love how you think and speak and challenge me. I love the way you look at the world, finding beauty and hope even after everything you have been through. I love you, Florence Turner, and I think I started loving you the moment I saw you standing bloody but unbowed, protecting a child you barely knew." Tears were streaming down Florence's face again, but she was smiling. "No one has ever said such things to me before. Then everyone else was a fool." Isaiah reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away and wipe the tears from her cheeks with his thumbs. "You don't have to say it back. I'm not trying to pressure you, I just need you to know how I feel." "I think I might love you too," Florence whispered. "That's what terrifies me. It feels too big, too fast, too much to contain. Love doesn't follow a schedule or care about conventions. It just is." Isaiah let his hands fall to her shoulders, then down her arms to take her hands again. "But we can take our time with everything else. We can court properly, let you get to know this life, make sure this is what you truly want. I'm not going anywhere, Florence. I'll wait as long as you need." "What if I needed years? Then I'll wait years. What if I decide this life isn't for me?" That thought caused physical pain, but Isaiah forced himself to answer honestly. "Then I'll accept your decision and do everything in my power to remain your friend, even if my heart is breaking. Your happiness matters more to me than my own desires." Florence studied his face, and whatever she saw there seemed to satisfy her. She squeezed his hands. "I don't think I'll need years, but I do need time to be certain. To know that this feeling is real and lasting, not just the romance of being wanted for the first time in my life." "That's fair. Take all the time you need." They spent the rest of the day talking, planning, dreaming. Isaiah showed her the spring where he got water, the garden plot where he grew vegetables in the short mountain summer, the spot by the stream where he often sat to think. Florence asked dozens of questions about practical matters. How did he preserve food for winter? Where did he get supplies? What did he do when he was sick or injured? How did he handle the isolation? Isaiah answered everything honestly, not trying to paint the life as easier than it was. There were hard times, dangerous times, lonely times. But there were also moments of incredible beauty and peace. Moments of satisfaction in building something with your own hands. Moments of connection with the natural world that were impossible to find in crowded cities. Mrs. Henderson rejoined them for a simple dinner of venison stew and fresh bread that Isaiah had, with surprising skill, made that morning in anticipation of their visit. The older woman watched Isaiah and Florence with obvious approval, occasionally making comments designed to showcase Isaiah's virtues. "Did you know Isaiah made all this furniture himself? And he carved the most beautiful cradle for my granddaughter last year. He has a true gift for working with wood." Isaiah felt his ears heat with embarrassment, but Florence smiled at him with warmth and amusement. As the sun began to set, Isaiah reluctantly acknowledged they needed to head back to Empire City. The ride down was quieter, all of them tired but content. Florence leaned back against Isaiah's chest, and he let himself imagine that this was their life, that they were returning home together, that he had the right to hold her like this every day. When they reached Empire City, Isaiah helped Florence down from the horse and walked her to her door while Mrs. Henderson made herself scarce, claiming she needed to check on something at the hotel. "Thank you," Florence said softly, "for showing me your home, for sharing that part of yourself with me. Thank you for coming, for being willing to see it as more than just a cabin in the woods." Isaiah hesitated, then added, "I know Mrs. Prescott's words hurt you, but please don't let them steal your hope. We can build something real together, Florence." "I know we can. I'm starting to believe that too," she said. Then, rising on her toes, she pressed a soft kiss to his cheek. "Good night, Isaiah." Isaiah touched his cheek where she had kissed him, feeling like a love-struck boy. "Good night, Florence." Over the following weeks, their relationship deepened and solidified. Isaiah came to town regularly, and Florence began helping him with tasks around his cabin, learning the skills she would need if she chose to live there permanently. She learned to garden, to preserve food, to cook over an open fire. Isaiah was a patient teacher, showing her not just what to do but why, helping her understand the rhythm of mountain life. Florence also introduced Isaiah more fully to town life. They attended a church social together, where Isaiah endured the curious stares and whispered conversations with stoic patience. They had dinner with Mrs. Henderson and her family. They spent time with Jacob and Emma, and Isaiah found himself imagining what it might be like to have children of their own someday. The change in Isaiah was remarkable. The solitary mountain man who had barely spoken to anyone for years was slowly rejoining humanity, learning again how to be part of a community. And it was all because of Florence, because loving her made him want to be more than he had been, to build a life that had room for others. Then, 3 months after they met, everything changed in a single afternoon. Isaiah had come to town for supplies and planned to meet Florence after she finished a mending job for one of the wealthier families in Empire City. He was loading goods onto his horse when he heard shouting from the direction of the school. His blood went cold. That was where Florence had said she would be working. Isaiah ran, his long legs eating up the distance in seconds. He rounded the corner to find a scene that made his heart stop. Florence was on the ground, blood streaming from a cut on her forehead, and standing over her was John Prescott, the son of the ranch owner where Florence had worked. He was drunk, swaying slightly, his face twisted with anger. "Think you're too good for me," Prescott slurred. "Choose that mountain savage over a man with prospects?" Isaiah saw red. He crossed the remaining distance in 3 strides and caught Prescott's arm just as the man was raising it to strike Florence again. With a twist and a shove, Isaiah sent Prescott sprawling into the dirt. "Stay down," Isaiah growled, his voice barely human, "or I won't be responsible for what happens next." Prescott tried to stand, but one look at Isaiah's face convinced him to remain where he was. A small crowd had gathered, drawn by the commotion, and Isaiah heard their shocked whispers. But his focus was on Florence. He knelt beside her, his large hands gentle as he examined the cut on her forehead. "Can you stand?" "I think so," Florence said, though her voice was shaky. "He surprised me. I didn't hear him coming. It's all right, I've got you." Isaiah lifted her easily, cradling her against his chest. To the crowd, he said, "Someone fetch the doctor, and someone else fetch the sheriff. Mr. Prescott is going to answer for this." "You can't prove anything," Prescott shouted from the ground. "It's her word against mine." It's her word, my word, and the word of everyone here who can see the guilt written all over your face," Isaiah said coldly. He turned his back on Prescott, dismissing him, and carried Florence toward the doctor's office. Dr. Matthews, a competent man in his 50s, cleaned and bandaged Florence's head wound while Isaiah hovered nearby, his fists clenched with suppressed rage. The injury wasn't serious, but it could have been. If Isaiah had arrived even a minute later, if Prescott had hit her again. "She'll be fine," Dr. Matthews assured Isaiah. "The cut is shallow and there's no sign of concussion, but she should rest for a few days." "I'll make sure she does," Isaiah said firmly. After the sheriff had taken statements and assured Isaiah that Prescott would be charged with assault, Isaiah carried Florence back to her room. He set her down carefully on the bed, then knelt beside her. "I should have been there sooner." "I should have. You couldn't have known," Florence interrupted, placing her hand on his cheek. "And you did come. You saved me. I can't keep doing this, Florence. I can't keep wondering if you're safe every time I'm not with you." Isaiah took her hand, pressing it to his lips. "Marry me." Florence's eyes widened. "Isaiah, I know we said we would take our time. I know we were going to court properly and make sure this was right. But I can't wait anymore. I need to know you're with me, that I have the right to protect you and care for you every single day. I need to know that when men like Prescott look at you, they see my wife and know you're under my protection." Isaiah moved from kneeling to sitting on the edge of the bed, still holding her hand. "I love you, Florence. I want to build a life with you, have children with you, grow old with you. Say yes, please say yes." Florence looked at him, her eyes full of tears but also something that looked like joy. "Yes, yes," Isaiah repeated, hardly daring to believe. "Yes, I'll marry you. Yes, I'll live with you in your cabin in the mountains. Yes, I'll build a life with you." Florence smiled through her tears. "I love you, Isaiah Patterson. I think I have loved you since the moment you stepped between me and those bullies, but I was too afraid to admit it. But I'm not afraid anymore. I'm choosing this. I'm choosing you. I'm choosing us." Isaiah cupped her face in his hands and kissed her, pouring everything he felt into that connection. It was their first real kiss, and it was soft and sweet and full of promise. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard, and Isaiah rested his forehead against hers. "I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret this decision," he vowed. "I know you will. That's why I said yes." They were married 2 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the church in Empire City. Mrs. Henderson cried happy tears and served as Florence's witness, while the livery owner, a gruff man named Tom who had become something of a friend to Isaiah, stood up for him. Jacob and Emma were there, along with their mother, and several other townspeople who had come to respect both Isaiah and Florence. Florence wore a new dress she had made from the green fabric Isaiah had given her months before, and Isaiah had gotten a haircut and trimmed his beard for the occasion. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, and Isaiah kissed his bride, the small congregation cheered. The celebration afterward was modest but joyful. Mrs. Henderson had prepared a feast at the hotel, and people brought food and well wishes. Even the sheriff showed up to congratulate them and inform Isaiah that Prescott had been sent to stay with relatives in Denver while awaiting trial. As evening approached, Isaiah and Florence said their goodbyes and began the ride to the cabin. Florence rode in front of Isaiah again, but now she wore his ring on her finger and carried his name. Mrs. Turner, Florence Turner Patterson. She had insisted on keeping her original surname as well, and Isaiah had readily agreed. She was still herself, after all, just as she had demanded. The cabin looked welcoming as they approached, smoke curling from the chimney thanks to arrangements Isaiah had made with Tom. Inside, they found that friends had been busy. Fresh flowers brightened the table, supplies had been stocked, and someone had even made the bed with fresh linens. Mrs. Henderson, I suspect, Florence said with a smile. She has been plotting this for weeks. Remind me to thank her next time we're in town, Isaiah said. He was suddenly nervous, which was ridiculous. This was Florence, the woman he loved, the woman he knew better than anyone. But this was also their wedding night, and he wanted everything to be perfect for her. Florence seemed to sense his nervousness. She took his hand and led him to sit in one of the chairs by the fire. Then she settled herself on his lap, her arms around his neck. "I love you," she said simply. "And I trust you. Everything else will figure itself out." Isaiah held her close, breathing in the lavender scent of her hair, feeling the solid reality of her in his arms, his wife, his partner, his future. They talked quietly by the fire as the evening deepened, making plans for their life together. Florence wanted to expand the garden, and Isaiah promised to build her raised beds. Isaiah wanted to add a room to the cabin, and Florence suggested making it a library where they could keep all their books. They talked about maybe getting chickens, about teaching Florence to fish, about spending winters reading by the fire and summers exploring the mountains. When they finally went to bed, it was with the easy intimacy of two people who had chosen each other completely. And if Isaiah held Florence a little tighter than necessary, and if Florence pressed a little closer than strictly required, well, that was between them and the stars visible through the cabin window. The next months were among the happiest of Isaiah's life. He taught Florence everything he knew about surviving and thriving in the mountains, and she proved to be an eager and quick student. She learned to fish and hunt small game, to track animals and read weather signs, to make the most of limited supplies. Florence also brought her own skills to their partnership. She expanded the garden and learned to preserve everything they grew. She made their cabin into a true home with small touches that made Isaiah smile every time he noticed them. Curtains on the windows, a quilt for their bed that she had made from scraps, drawings from Jacob and Emma on the walls. She organized their books and created a cozy reading corner where they spent many evenings. They also made regular trips to Empire City, maintaining friendships and connections. Florence continued to take in some mending work, though now she did it more because she enjoyed it than because she needed the money. Isaiah sold the furniture he made and the furs he trapped, building up their savings. Jacob and Emma came to visit sometimes, staying for a few days at a time. Isaiah taught Jacob to fish and whittle, while Florence helped Emma with her reading. The children called them Aunt Florence and Uncle Isaiah, and the couple treasured those visits. As spring turned to summer and summer to fall, Florence began to show signs of carrying a child. Isaiah noticed the changes before she said anything. The slight thickening of her waist, the way she grew tired more easily, the mornings when she couldn't keep down breakfast. When she finally confirmed what he had suspected, Isaiah felt joy so intense it almost frightened him. "Are you happy?" Florence asked, watching his face carefully. "Happy doesn't begin to cover it," Isaiah said, pulling her into his arms. "Terrified, excited, grateful, amazed, all of those and more. A child, Florence, our child." "I was afraid you might think it was too soon," Florence admitted, relaxing against him. "Too soon. We're married, we love each other, and we're building a life together. This is exactly the right time." Isaiah placed his hand carefully on her still flat stomach. "This baby is a gift, and I promise to do everything in my power to keep both of you safe and happy." Dr. Matthews confirmed the pregnancy on their next visit to Empire City and estimated the baby would arrive in early spring. Florence bloomed with her pregnancy, growing round and beautiful despite her occasional discomfort. Isaiah found himself even more protective than before, insisting she rest more, refusing to let her do heavy work, bringing her water and food at every opportunity. "I am pregnant, not fragile," Florence protested one afternoon when Isaiah had insisted on carrying water from the stream for her. "Humoring your overprotective husband is good practice for humoring your overprotective children," Isaiah countered, kissing her forehead. Florence laughed and accepted the water, and Isaiah counted it as a victory. As fall deepened into winter, they prepared for the baby's arrival. Isaiah spent every spare moment building a cradle, carving it with intricate designs of mountain flowers and animals. Florence sewed tiny clothes and blankets, her hands moving with practiced skill. They talked late into the night about names and hopes and fears, building the foundation of the family they would become. The winter was harder than most, with heavy snows that sometimes kept them cabin-bound for days at a time. But Isaiah found he didn't mind. With Florence there, the cabin felt warm and complete. They read books aloud to each other, played cards, talked about everything and nothing. Florence's stomach grew round and impressive, and Isaiah would often place his hand there to feel the baby move, marveling at the life they had created together. One evening in late February, Florence put down her sewing and looked at Isaiah seriously. "I need to tell you something." Isaiah's heart clenched with sudden fear. "What's wrong? Is it the baby?" "No, nothing like that. I just realized we never really talked about what happened with my father, about why I came west." Florence twisted her hands together. "I want our child to grow up with honesty, which means I need to be honest with you about everything." Isaiah moved to sit beside her, taking her hands in his. "Tell me," and she did. She told him about her mother's death when Florence was 16, about how her father had turned to drink to numb the pain. She told him about caring for her father for years, watching him slowly destroy himself, unable to stop him or save him. She told him about the man who had courted her, who had seemed to offer an escape, only to abandon her when her father's debts and reputation became too much of an embarrassment. "When he died, I felt terrible relief," Florence whispered. "What kind of daughter feels relieved when her father dies?" "The kind who has been carrying an impossible burden for years," Isaiah said gently. "The kind who gave everything she had to someone who couldn't be saved. You're not terrible, Florence. You're human. And you did more than most people would have. I was so afraid you would think less of me if you knew. Never. If anything, I admire you even more. You survived circumstances that would have broken most people, and you still managed to retain your compassion and your strength." Isaiah pulled her close as her pregnant belly would allow. "There is nothing you could tell me that would change how I feel about you. Nothing." Florence cried then, deep sobs that seemed to release years of pent-up guilt and pain. Isaiah held her through it all, offering comfort without trying to fix or minimize her feelings. When she finally quieted, exhausted from the emotional release, he carried her to bed and held her until she fell asleep. A few weeks later, on a cold March morning when the first hints of spring were beginning to show, Florence woke Isaiah with a grip on his arm that was almost painful. "Isaiah, the baby is coming." Isaiah's carefully laid plans for a calm, organized response flew out the window. He scrambled out of bed, pulling on clothes, building up the fire, heating water, and generally making Florence laugh despite her discomfort. "Isaiah, we have time. First babies take a while, oh." Florence gasped, gripping the edge of the table as another contraction hit. "I'm going for Dr. Matthews," Isaiah said, fear making his voice sharp. "There's no time. He's 3 hours away, and I don't think this baby is going to wait that long." Florence met his eyes, and despite her fear, she looked determined. "You're going to have to help me. I don't know how to deliver a baby." You've helped animals birth, haven't you? That's different, not as different as you think. Women have been having babies for thousands of years, Isaiah. We're designed for this. I just need you to stay calm and help me. Stay calm. She needed him to stay calm when she was about to give birth, and he had no idea what he was doing. Isaiah took a deep breath, then another. Florence needed him. That was all that mattered. He could panic later. The next several hours were simultaneously the longest and shortest of Isaiah's life. He helped Florence through contractions, brought her water, supported her as she walked and paced and eventually settled on the bed. He followed her instructions and his instincts, and when she told him the baby was coming, he was there to catch his son as he entered the world. A son. Isaiah stared down at the tiny, red-faced baby in his hands, overwhelmed with emotion so powerful it threatened to bring him to his knees. This impossibly small person was his son, his and Florence's, a life they had created together. "Let me see him," Florence said, exhausted but smiling. "Let me see our baby." Isaiah carefully placed the baby on Florence's chest, and she cradled him close, tears streaming down her face. "Hello, little one. We've been waiting for you." Isaiah cleaned them both as best he could, his hands shaking with emotion and residual fear. But they were both alive and seemed healthy, and that was what mattered. He wrapped the baby in a blanket Florence had made, then settled himself beside them on the bed, his arm around Florence, his free hand touching his son's impossibly tiny fingers. "We need a name," Florence said softly. What should we call him? They had discussed names for months, but had never quite decided. Now, looking at his son, Isaiah thought of new beginnings and second chances, of the life he had built with Florence and the future they would create together. What about Thomas? "After Tom, who stood up with me at our wedding," Florence smiled. "Thomas Patterson, I like it. Thomas Isaiah Patterson." "He's perfect," Isaiah said, his voice thick with emotion. "You're both perfect." "We should still have the doctor check on us when the weather clears," Florence said practically, but she was smiling. "But I think we did all right, you and I. We did better than all right. We brought our son into the world together. I wouldn't have wanted it any other way." As if in agreement, baby Thomas made a small sound, and both parents looked down at him with wonder and delight. The next days were a blur of learning and adaptation. Isaiah rode to Empire City as soon as the weather allowed, bringing back Dr. Matthews, who pronounced both mother and baby healthy. News of the birth spread quickly, and over the following weeks, a steady stream of visitors made the journey to the cabin. Mrs. Henderson brought food and baby clothes. Tom brought a rocking horse he had made. Jacob and Emma came with their mother to meet the new baby. Isaiah found himself marveling at how quickly his life had changed. A year ago, he had been alone, convinced he preferred it that way. Now he had a wife he loved more than he thought possible, and a son who had stolen his heart completely. The cabin that had once felt perfectly adequate now felt too small, bursting with the life and love they were building. True to his word, Isaiah expanded the cabin that summer, adding 2 new rooms, a library for their books and a bedroom for Thomas and any future children they might have. Florence planted a larger garden and started a small herb plot. They got chickens, and Thomas's first laugh came while watching the hens scratch in the dirt. Life settled into a rhythm that felt right. Mornings began with Thomas's demands for breakfast, followed by chores and work. Afternoons were for teaching, as Isaiah began showing Thomas the mountain world he would inherit. Evenings were for family, the 3 of them together by the fire, reading and talking and simply being. When Thomas was 2, Florence became pregnant again, and this time a daughter was born, healthy and loud and opinionated from her first breath. They named her Margaret, after Florence's mother, and called her Maggie. She had Florence's red hair and Isaiah's dark eyes, and she had both parents wrapped around her tiny fingers within minutes of birth. Thomas adored his little sister, though he was sometimes jealous of the attention she received. Isaiah made sure to spend time alone with his son, teaching him to track and fish and carve wood. Those times were precious, watching Thomas grow and learn, seeing bits of himself and Florence in the boy. Time passed, as it always does. Thomas grew tall and strong, with his father's build and his mother's quick mind. Maggie proved to be fearless and adventurous, always getting into trouble and charming her way out of it. 2 more children followed, a boy named Daniel and another girl named Sarah, each one loved and cherished. Isaiah and Florence grew older together, their love deepening with each passing year. They still made regular trips to Empire City, maintaining friendships and connections. Jacob and Emma grew up and married, having children of their own, and the Patterson children called them aunt and uncle. The cabin expanded again and again, growing from a simple structure into a sprawling home that could accommodate their growing family and the frequent visitors who came to stay. Isaiah built furniture for all of them, and Florence taught her daughters to sew and garden while Isaiah taught his sons to hunt and build. There were hard times, of course. Years when the winter was too harsh or the game too scarce. Illnesses and injuries that had to be treated with limited resources. Arguments and disagreements because even the deepest love couldn't prevent all conflict. But they faced everything together, Isaiah and Florence, their partnership stronger than any challenge. As the children grew older and began to make their own ways in the world, Isaiah and Florence found themselves with more time alone together. They returned to long walks through the mountains, to evenings reading by the fire, to the quiet intimacy that had first drawn them together. One evening, 25 years after they had first met, Florence and Isaiah sat on the porch they had built, watching the sunset paint the mountain peaks in shades of gold and purple. Their children were all grown, Thomas working as a guide in the mountains, Maggie married to a good man in Empire City, Daniel running his own ranch, and Sarah studying to be a teacher. "You ever regret it?" Isaiah asked, taking Florence's hand. "Giving up your independence, choosing this life?" Florence looked at him with the same fierce love that had captivated him all those years ago. "Never, not once. This life, this family, it's everything I never knew I needed. I'm still myself, Isaiah. You never tried to change me. You just gave me space to become more than I was. You did the same for me. I was barely living before I met you, just existing day to day. You brought me back to life, made me part of the world again. We saved each other," Florence said simply, "and we built something beautiful together." Isaiah pulled her close, and they sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to appear. He thought about that day in Empire City, when he had seen Florence defending Jacob from bullies, her courage and compassion on full display. He had been captivated then, but what he had felt was nothing compared to the deep, abiding love he felt now. Because real love wasn't just about the dramatic moments or the grand gestures. It was about choosing each other every day, through good times and bad. It was about building a life together, one decision at a time. It was about seeing someone at their worst and their best and loving them through all of it. And it was about knowing that no matter what came, you would face it together. The years continued to pass, bringing more grandchildren, more memories, more joy. Isaiah and Florence grew old together, their bodies slower but their minds still sharp, their love still strong. The cabin was filled with laughter when the family came to visit, 4 generations gathering to share meals and stories. Isaiah still carved wood, though his hands weren't as steady as they once were. Florence still sewed, though her eyes needed spectacles now. But they still took walks together, still read together by the fire, still found new ways to surprise and delight each other. One morning, when Isaiah was in his 70s, he woke to find Florence watching him with a soft smile. "What?" he asked, his voice rough with sleep. "I'm just thinking about how lucky we are, how lucky I am. When I came west all those years ago, I was running from heartbreak and hoping for a fresh start. But I found so much more than that. I found you. I found home." Isaiah reached for her hand, his fingers still finding hers with the ease of decades of practice. "I'm the lucky one. You took a broken soldier hiding in the mountains and taught him how to live again. You gave me a family, a purpose, a reason to wake up every morning. You gave me everything." "We gave each other everything," Florence corrected. "That's what love is, isn't it? Two people making each other better, stronger, more complete." Isaiah pulled her close, holding her against his chest, and felt complete contentment wash over him. This was what he had fought for in the war, what he had sought in his isolation: peace. Not the absence of conflict, but the presence of love so deep and true it anchored everything else. As the sun rose over the mountains, painting their bedroom in soft golden light, Isaiah and Florence lay together. Their lives intertwined so thoroughly that it was impossible to say where one ended and the other began. Their children and grandchildren would carry on their legacy, spreading the love and values they had instilled throughout the world. But for now, in this moment, it was just the two of them. The mountain man and the brave woman he had fallen in love with, still together, still in love, still building their life one day at a time. And that was exactly how it should be, exactly how it would always be, as long as they both drew breath. The story of Isaiah and Florence Patterson became something of a legend in Empire City and the surrounding mountains. People would tell their children about the mountain man who came down from his cabin and found a woman defending a child from bullies, about how her bravery had captured his heart completely. They would talk about the love that had sustained them through decades, the family they had built, the way they had chosen each other every single day. But for Isaiah and Florence, it wasn't a legend. It was simply their life, the best life either of them could have imagined. And as they grew old together in the mountains they loved, surrounded by the family they had created and the community they had joined, they knew that every choice that had led them to each other had been worth it. Because love, true love, was worth everything.